Hello, everybody. It is a little chilly in Vancouver today, so I've got my big scarf on, which is kind of crazy in March, but here we are. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about communication, why your child might struggle with communication. I have some notes if you see me referring here to the side, so just so I don't leave anything out that I wanted to speak about. So going into communication, do you feel like you're having to constantly guess or figure out what your child needs or what they want? Um, or maybe you feel like they understand, they're having some troubles with the communication they're getting from you. Maybe they're having troubles on the other end of understanding what you're communicating. So it could be either way. Now, if either of those are sounding familiar, you're not alone. This is one of the areas that I help parents with. It's a huge, huge area. Often it is one of our first priorities, communication. We're going to talk about how you can start helping your child today. So many parents come to me and they're worried and they might be saying things like they're frustrated. Their child is frustrated because they can't tell you what they want. Maybe they're using other behaviors like crying or grabbing something instead of asking. They're not answering if you call them. Maybe your child was saying words and now they're not communicating as much. Maybe it's really hard to figure out what they're wanting. Maybe they bring you over to the cupboard, but when you get there, they're not able to point to the thing, or when you offer them choices, it's really hard to figure out what it is in that cupboard that they're wanting. Now, communication isn't just about talking. I- in in um in this world, we kind of distinguish between vocal, which is spoken language, or verbal language could be communicating in other ways. So it could be sign language, it could be written, could be with an AAC device. But it's not, it's about expressing needs and wants and feelings in ways that others can understand. Now, when a child doesn't have a way to do that effectively, to be able to tell you what they want and what they need and how they're feeling, that's when we're seeing frustration build. And that's when it can lead to meltdowns and refusals and maybe even power struggles. Now, I'm sure you've done this before, but putting yourself in a child's shoes, um, then I think we can all empathize that if we weren't able to communicate what we're wanting, what we're needing, or what we don't want, what we're not wanting in that moment, or how we're feeling, then we would also be getting very frustrated and potentially having meltdowns ourselves. So it is really key to understand that that can be where these struggles are coming from. Now, there's a couple of reasons why communication may be difficult. Some kids, so when we're thinking about language, there's quite a few different aspects. I'll bring up a couple of things here. Um, Kids may struggle with understanding language, which is called our receptive language. And generally, we pick up language receptively first before we learn to express that language or say that language or verbalize it in some way. Some kids may understand expressive language or may be better at expressive language, but have a harder time understanding what they're saying. Um, there's also speech and language pathologists have coined a term called gestalt, or maybe you say gestalt. I don't know. There's a few different ways of saying it. Language processors, whereas instead of learning word by word, kids are actually learning through scripts and phrases. They may learn those most often from movies and TV shows and things like that, or from phrases maybe that they hear their parents saying. They generally will learn those, including the intonation and everything it's said with, and then they practice those phrases and learn to apply them into different contexts. So there's a few different ways to think about communication and how kids learn. Now, kids may struggle with communication if they haven't learned an easy, reliable way for themselves to communicate. So maybe they don't know the words or the gestures or signs that will get that particular need met um, in the moment. And unfortunately, it becomes harder and harder for a kid to try to communicate when they're feeling frustrated that they're not being understood. So, if that is the case, then our brains make it less easy for kids to be able to find that language center. A speech and language pathologist who I've received some training from on some sensory things that I will go into a bit more in this group, talks about a language, a few different areas of language to do with um, a staircase, and where language is not available to us if we are not in a regulated state. So it can be tricky when kids are in this point where maybe they don't know the certain words for those really key things they want, or even just something in that moment they're becoming frustrated, which also makes it hard for them to come up with the word. Another instance why this might happen is kids might see they might not have yet had a ton of success with using that communication method. So if kids are learning words or sounds or signs, and they haven't yet been understood in using those, they may stop trying or may not consistently use that word or sign or sound again because it hasn't yet resulted in the thing. Um, some kids may not also know the right context or time to use that communication. So they may have, maybe it takes longer to process, and maybe they're asking for something when they're in a different context. So maybe they moved to another room and they were still asking for that thing in the cupboard, but now they're not in front of the cupboard. So it's harder for the parent to figure out what they want because they're not right there. So there's a few things that could be going on, and these are not the only ones, but just a few things. I always like to bring a little perspective into why things might be happening. So a few things that you can do to start improving communication today. You don't need a full like plan to start improving communication. Um, but there's a few really simple things that you can do right away. So every single attempt at communication should definitely be celebrated, especially for these little ones who are learning language, learning sounds, signs, ways to communicate for the first time, a point, a gesture, bringing you any of those. Then make sure that we're celebrating those communications. If you are able to figure out what that thing is, even better, because it is way more natural to reinforce with the item. So if a child is wanting juice and they say ch, and you figure out that it's the juice, then getting the juice itself is going to be way more meaningful than yay, you said juice. So reinforcing with with the natural consequence is really powerful. Um, Also, try to make communication as easy as possible. Get down on your kids' level. Don't wait for words. You can help that communication along. You can offer up two items. If one is, if you think your child is hungry, you have a likely idea of what it could be. Bring maybe two of those down. See if they look towards the item, if they move towards the item, and then put the other one down and be like, this one. And if they show then that is it, you'd be like, yay, you got that one. Maybe it was the crackers or the rice cakes. So making that communication a little bit easier, instead of having to name or look at a whole array of a whole cupboard of things. Another thing that you can work on in a fun way is games around kids being able to find something. So you can create a little game where we're like, oh, let's find blah blah blah. So depending what it is, it could be, hey, let's find the music, and we go around and we find out where that music is coming from. Then maybe we go to let's find Teddy, and we go looking. Maybe on the couch you have a whole bunch of items. Which one's the teddy? And we're looking at helping with different vocabulary items. You can also work on helping kids to respond and know their name with something fun after you call them. We'll go into that a little bit more when I talk about the steps involved in the balance program, because there is a purpose for working on name in beyond this as well. But just wanted to give you some easy, very quick tips, making it easier for kids to communicate, making sure you celebrate every attempt, try to create fun games around communication and building success into those games and into everyday life. And also just bringing yourself down to kids level, or to where the items are that they are indicating that they want. Let me know below if you have any communication specific questions, because I will be happy to get to those. Or if there's anything new from these strategies, or reasons why it might be a challenge for your kiddo to communicate that I talked about today, let me know, and make sure that you jump on the next live to bring your questions or ask them below. Thanks, everyone.